Hi, I'm Sam Sheehan at Stitch and Steel Homestead, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about tree hay and how we use it on our farm. So it's kind of hard to see what we've got going on in here because we're getting towards the end of the season, and most of what we've got left here is the leftover Christmas trees that we went around and picked up in the first week of January. So we've got a whole bunch of conifers in here that we can feed to our goats and our rabbits. But as we get kind of into the back here, you can see that we've got some like maples and willows, and there's also sumacs and raspberry canes. I think there's some poplar, there's some grapevines. Unfortunately, they're all they don't show off very well. They're in the back row here. So we have this old shed, which is, full of holes and not very weather tight. Certainly we couldn't keep livestock in here, but it's just right for letting the right amount of airflow come in and between the branches to dry out our tree hay. So this has been an ideal place to hang them. We do get a little bit of snow and sometimes some rain come in down the backside there, because you can see there's sort of a gap. Maybe you can't see it, but there's a gap between the roof and the barn. So the back row does get a little bit wet, but what we found is that it also dries fast enough that we haven't had any problems with mold or anything like that. So what we do is we take down bundles from here and we just take them into the stalls in the barn and feed them to the animals that need them. We just started harvesting tree hay to feed to our animals this year, and we don't really have a whole lot of places we can harvest from yet. Our farm kind of looked like a golf course when we first moved in. There was a couple of mature trees out by the highway and 2 big maples in the front yard, but for the most part it's a lot of flat grasses and nothing tree or shrub like really growing anywhere. So what we've done is there was a tiny corner in the back that had some sumac taking over it, so we trimmed that up. We trimmed up our maples and we got some stuff from that. Our grapevines that we have wild grapevines growing all over our front porch, so we harvested those as well. And we've planted raspberries, so those canes are excellent for feeding, especially to the rabbits. Yeah, really the goats too. They're pretty good for everybody. Another source that we've had for some tree hay is a farming friend of ours let us raid her hedgerows and harvest some willows and some aspens from her. And like I said, we went out in January and we said, okay, anybody who had, Christmas trees that they didn't spray any kind of fire retardant on and didn't use tinsel, we would pick those up and use those to feed our animals. It's a bit of a controversial practice because yes, there are some herbicides generally used in the process of growing Christmas trees. However, what people forget about is there's also herbicides used in growing hay. So we don't really feel that it was any different, and as a free source of feed, it was just something we couldn't ignore. So we picked up, I think, 14 or 15 Christmas trees this year. Some of them we've kept whole. You can see we've still got a couple of whole ones back here just kind of standing up in the corner. The goats really seem to like getting the whole trees and being able to peel it themselves, and we like keeping one in the rabbit colony just because it gives another hidey place for the young rabbits to kind of tuck in and amongst the branches. So that's worked out pretty well for us. We thought we wanted to save the logs from the Christmas trees to use as mushroom logs in the spring, but honestly most of them are so narrow in diameter and such a short length where they are actually thick enough on the ones that are, that it's just really not worth it. So next time we won't necessarily bother stripping the branches and bundling up like this. I think we'll just leave more of them as whole trees and let them take what they will from it, because then they also peel the bark and eat that as well. So we're learning. In the years to come, we plan to expand what we can harvest for tree hay by planting windbreaks essentially between our grazing paddocks where we rotationally graze our horses and goats. Some of the species that we want to plant include mulberry and black locust, some more willows, some birch, some poplars, hazelnuts. and also some kind of wild type or crabapple type trees. Some of those are being chosen because they've either got incredibly high protein levels or, you know, are nutritionally very good for the animals. Some of them have been chosen because they are like herbal medicinals that the animals will use as needed to help ward off parasites and treat various ailments or kind of prevent them from getting a head start. And others are just chosen simply because they grow fast and we can harvest a lot of it. So currently, with what we have here, with what we managed to gather and glean this year, we can feed our animals tree hay 3 times a week, and we'd like to be able to feed them tree hay daily. It's very hard to make a video with a straight face when Rhiannon's standing right outside the shed here making funny faces at me. Hey, pretty girl. Hey, pretty girl. Hey, Rhea. Oh, yeah. We kind of refer to our tree hay as crop stacking here because we cannot grow more grass than we currently grow to feed these guys. We have 6.4 acres and that's it. So if we want them to be able to graze the grasses all summer long, we don't have enough to make hay for the winter time. Whereas when we add in the tree crops, that's something that when planted at the right density will not out-compete the grasses planted around them. It'll actually help by sheltering it from the summer's sun and keep them growing a little bit longer. And then we have sort of vertically integrated, stacked resources. So we've got the grasses growing down low, we'll have some bushes growing to a certain height, and then we'll have some trees that grow taller that will be pollarded so that we can harvest the tree hay from them. So we'll be creating more shelter in our pastures. We'll be shading out the worst of the summer heat from some of those grasses. We will be providing wildlife habitat, and we will be producing more food for our livestock than we otherwise could with this place looking like a flat golf course. Our need for grass hay will never totally disappear because these guys out here just don't eat very much tree hay. That's not natural to their species, and there's not very much that they can find palatable and accept or digest very easily. So we will always still have some grass hay delivered, but if we can reduce what's being used by other critters who don't necessarily need it, then it still lowers our feed bill and our reliance on other farmers in our area. Hey, pretties. This is our grass hay shed, if you will, or our feeding station. So it's got this railing along the front, and it's got, excuse me, Missy. So that railing continues in that section, but that one has latches on both sides, and it drops down. So then our friend with a tractor comes and he drops a big round bale right in here, and then we close up the gate and latch it again. And we just currently use a pitchfork and draw from here to feed hay to our goats and our rabbits inside of the barn as well. So this was an invention of my husband and I together. We kind of collaborated on it, and he built it. This existing structure was here. It just had walls and doors of plywood before, and so we kind of opened it up and then built the railings around it so that now it works as a very functional hay feeding space. Hi. Because our rabbits are so low to the ground and don't use very much of the vertical space in their colony, one of the things that we're going to start looking at when we've got bigger harvests of tree hay is to put some stringers across the roof going across the width of their stall and hanging our tree hay bundles from that so that their food is stored right in here in space that's already taken up and sort of allocated to them already. So we won't be losing any more space from any other enterprises or having to build an additional structure to store more tree hay. It'll be hanging right in here, right on top of our bunnies' heads. So that should work really well for us. And like I said, you know, at most they'll sit up on top of that hay bunker. So that is the highest space that our rabbits ever take up in this colony. So there's still a good 5 feet or more above their heads. That's really just wasted space. So we think that's going to work out really well for us. Trees that are being maintained for tree hay are generally harvested by either coppicing or pollarding. Coppicing means cutting the bush off right close to the ground, maybe as tall as a foot off of the ground. And what happens then is that those stumps of the tree will send up a ton of new vertical shoots in the spring. They'll be thin, they'll be straight for the most part, and not too forked or branched, and they'll have lots of leaves on them, and it'll grow more more whips, if you will, or more branches with leaves for the amount of space that it's taking up than, you know, a natural tree would. The other option is to pollard them, which means cutting them off usually somewhere just above about head height. And again, from that stump where you've cut it, it will send out numerous vertical, tall, thin, non-branching shoots. Those are what we want to harvest for our tree hay, because the branches are thin enough that the animals can actually eat the whole branch, or at least they will strip the bark and the sapwood off of them, and the inner bark as well. So there's very little left over that they're wasting with those thinner branches. And the other point is that it forces the tree to put out more of the kind of branches that we're looking for than it would if it was growing naturally. It's kind of responding to the trauma of being cut, if you will, by putting out those shoots. So we'll harvest, kind of depending on the species, anywhere between a 3 and 10 year cycle. So it'll be anywhere from 3 to 10 years between when we cut a tree and then when we come back and harvest from it again. And that allows it to have enough seasons of having those leaves on, acting as solar panels, gathering energy and storing it in the roots to keep feeding the tree and keep it alive, even though we're giving it a pretty dramatic haircut each year. There are records of pollarded trees that are centuries old. So I wouldn't say it necessarily shortens the lifespan of the tree, but we're prepared that it could, and it might need to be, our trees might need to be replaced perhaps a little more often than a tree that's just allowed to grow naturally on its own. To the other side of that, though, any diseased branches, any problems are getting observed a lot more frequently than they often are on trees that are just kind of let to grow according to their own styles. So problems kind of get nipped in the bud and taken care of a little bit sooner than they would in just, say, a forest setting. So it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of works out on our farm. If you've used tree hay for your livestock before, or you're planning to, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let us know what your experiences have been with tree hay. Thanks so much for watching our video today. Take care, and I hope you get to enjoy some of this sunshine, because it's just glorious.